The wind howled through the pines, sharp and cold, as I clung to the edge of a cliff, my heart pounding louder than the storm brewing below. Eli, my best friend since we were kids stealing comics from the corner store, stood just above me, his hand outstretched, his blue eyes wide with something I couldn't name fear. Maybe. Or something deeper. Take my hand. Noah. Damn it. He shouted, his voice cracking like the thunder rolling over the Rockies. We weren't supposed to be here. Not like this. A weekend camping trip in Colorado's San Juan Mountains was meant to be a break from the grind of our small-town lives. A barista with dreams of writing novels. And Eli, the golden boy mechanic who could fix anything but his own restless heart. We'd grown up in Crestview, a speck of a town where everyone knew your business, and where being different wasn't just frowned upon, it was a sin whispered about in church pews. I'd come out as gay at 17, and though my parents tried to understand, the town's sideways glances never stopped. Eli, though, he'd always had my back. Screw him, he'd say, tossing me a beer with that lopsided grin. You're Noah. That's all that matters. But now, halfway up a mountain, with rain-slicked rocks under my boots and Eli's hand inches from mine, something felt different. His grip was too tight, his gaze too intense, like he was holding on to more than just me. I grabbed his hand, and he pulled me up, our chests heaving as we collapsed against a boulder. The storm was closing in, dark clouds swallowing the last of the daylight. Why the hell did you pick this trail? I panted, shoving wet hair out of my eyes. Eli didn't answer, just stared at the horizon, his jaw tight. I knew that look. He was hiding something again. Eli had always been a mystery wrapped in denim and charm. At 24, he was the guy every girl in Crestview wanted, with his sun-bleached hair and calloused hands that could rebuild an engine blindfolded. But he never dated. Not really. A few flings. Sure. But nothing stuck. I'd teased him about it for years, joking that he was too picky or secretly married to his toolbox. He'd laugh, but there was always this shadow in his eyes, like he was carrying a weight I couldn't see. I figured it was family stuff. His dad was a hard man. All whiskey and expectations, but lately, that shadow had grown darker. The trip was his idea. Let's get out of this dump, he'd said last week, tossing a map on my coffee table. Just you and me. Man. No phones. No bullshit. I'd agreed because it was Eli. Because he was the one person who made Crestview bearable. We'd packed his old Jeep with gear, driven 6 hours to the mountains, and hiked until our legs burned. But now, as we sat shivering under an overhang, the air between us felt charged, like the lightning flickering in the distance. You okay? I asked, my voice soft against the wind. Eli's fingers twitched around the small wooden heart he always carried, a carving he'd made in high school shop class. He didn't look at me, just nodded. But his silence was loud. I wanted to push, to ask what was eating him. But with Eli, you didn't pry. You waited. The rain hit then, hard and unrelenting, forcing us to scramble for the tent we'd pitched earlier. Inside, it was cramped, our sleeping bags pressed close. The storm roared outside, but in here, it was just us 12 guys. 2 histories. 2 secrets. I didn't know it yet, but this trip, this moment, was about to unravel everything I thought I knew about Eli. About us. As we lay there, the tent shaking, Eli finally spoke. Noah, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. There's something I gotta tell you. My stomach twisted. I'd heard that tone before when he told me his mom left, when he admitted he'd failed his first semester of trade school. But this was different. This was raw. I turned to face him, our eyes meeting in the dim glow of the lantern. "What is it?" I asked, my heart racing for reasons I couldn't explain. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his hand tightening around that damn wooden heart. "Not now," he muttered, turning away. "Tomorrow. After the climb." I wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the storm drowned out everything, and sleep took us both before I could fight for the truth. The next morning, the sky was clear, the mountains stretching out like a promise. We packed up, our breath visible in the crisp air, and started the ascent to the peak Eli had chosen, a brutal, near-vertical climb he swore would be worth it. "Trust me," he'd said, his grin almost convincing. I did trust him. Always had. But as we climbed, his silence grew heavier, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this trip wasn't about the view. It was about something he wasn't ready to say. By noon, we reached a ledge with a view that stole my breath-jagged peaks. Endless valleys. A world untouched by Crestview's judgment. Eli dropped his pack and sat, his knees pulled up, staring out like he was searching for answers in the clouds. I sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his shoulder. "Spit it out, man," I said, half joking, half pleading. "You're freaking me out." He laughed, but it was hollow. Then, slowly, he pulled the wooden heart from his pocket and pressed it into my hand. "Made this for you," he said, his voice low. "Back in high school. Never had the guts to give it to you." My fingers closed around the carving, smooth and warm from his touch. I didn't understand not yet, but my heart was pounding, and the world felt like it was tilting. "Eli," I started, but he cut me off, his eyes locking onto mine. "Noah, I'm not who you think I am." And with those words, the mountain seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the truth he'd hidden for years. The air on the ledge was thin, sharp, like it could cut through the haze of my thoughts. Eli's words hung between us, heavy as the pack on my back. "I'm not who you think I am." I clutched the wooden heart, its edges worn smooth, and stared at him, waiting for the rest. His face was a storm of emotions: fear, resolve, something like longing, and for the first time, I saw my best friend as a stranger. "Eli, what do you mean?" My voice was steadier than I felt. The valley sprawled below us, vast and indifferent. But up here, it was just us. And the weight of his confession was pressing down harder than the altitude. He ran a hand through his hair, the same nervous habit he'd had since we were kids. "I've been lying, Noah. To you. To everyone. Hell, to myself most of all." He laughed, a brittle sound, and looked away, his eyes tracing the distant peaks. "You know how Crestview is. You say one wrong thing, and you're done. My dad, he'd kill me if he knew." "Knew what?" I pressed, my pulse racing. I'd always thought I knew Eli inside and out: his favorite beer, the way he hummed Springsteen when he worked on his Jeep, the way he'd defend me when the town's whispers got too loud. But now, I wasn't sure of anything. He turned back to me, his blue eyes raw, unguarded. "I'm not straight, Noah. Never was." The words landed like a rock slide, sudden and shattering. I froze, the wooden heart digging into my palm. Eli, the guy who'd charmed every girl in high school, who'd shrugged off their advances with a grin, who'd been my rock through every heartbreak, was gay. By something else. My mind scrambled to catch up. You're what? I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't judging. God knows I'd been through that myself, but the shock was real. Eli had always been the straight one, the safe one, the one who didn't have to hide. Or so I'd thought. I don't know what I am exactly, he said, his voice breaking. I've spent years trying to figure it out, trying to be what everyone expects. My dad, the shop, the whole damn town, they want me to be this version of me that doesn't exist. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, like he was trying to hold himself together. But up here, with you, I can't keep pretending. I've been in love with you since we were 16. Noah. That's the truth. The world stopped. The wind, the birds, the distant hum of the earth, it all faded, leaving just Eli's words echoing in my head. In love with me. My best friend. The guy I'd spent years convincing myself I didn't have a crush on. Because he was straight. Because he was untouchable. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My heart was a mess of hope and fear and something I couldn't name. Say something, Eli pleaded, his voice raw. Please. I don't know what to say, I admitted, my hands shaking. You've been my best friend forever. Eli. I never thought. I trailed off, the wooden heart in my hand suddenly feeling like a grenade. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was scared. He snapped, then softened, his shoulders slumping. I saw what you went through. Noah. The looks. The whispers. The way your dad stopped looking you in the eye for a year. I couldn't do that. I couldn't lose you. Or my family. Or myself. He swallowed hard. But I'm tired of hiding. I brought you up here to tell you. To finally be honest. I just didn't expect it to feel like this. I looked at the heart in my hand. The one he'd carved for me years ago. And felt a pang of something regret. Maybe. For all the time we'd lost. Eli. I said. My voice steadying. You're not losing me. You're never gonna lose me. His eyes met mine. And for a moment, the world felt right again. Like the mountain had brought us to this exact spot for a reason. But the moment didn't last. A crack of thunder broke the silence. And we both looked up to see the storm we'd thought was gone rolling back in. Darker and angrier than before. We gotta move, Eli said, grabbing his pack. This ledge isn't safe. We scrambled down the trail. The rain starting to fall again. Cold and relentless. My mind was reeling, trying to process Eli's confession. The weight of his words. The way my own feelings were shifting like the loose rocks under our feet. I'd always cared about him. More than I'd let myself admit. But love. That was a line I'd never dared cross. Not with him. By the time we reached a lower campsite, soaked and exhausted, the storm was in full force again. We set up the tent in silence. The air between us thick with unspoken questions. Inside, we sat across from each other, the lantern casting shadows that danced like ghosts. So what now? I asked, my voice barely audible over the rain. I don't know, Eli admitted, his eyes searching mine. I just needed you to know. I couldn't keep it in anymore. He paused, then added, I don't expect you to feel the same. I had to be honest. I wanted to tell him I did feel something. That maybe I always had. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I reached out, my hand brushing his. We'll figure it out, I said. And for the first time that day, he smiled a real smile. Not the one he used to hide behind. As the storm raged on, we talked. really talked, for the first time in years. About his dad's expectations. About my dreams of leaving Crestview. About the fear of being who we really were. And though the mountain was unforgiving, it felt like it had given us something a chance to start over. To be honest. To be us. The rain didn't let up until dawn, leaving the mountain slick and treacherous. Eli and I sat in the tent, our knees brushing in the cramped space, the air heavy with the weight of his confession. I kept turning the wooden heart over in my hands, its smooth surface grounding me as my mind spun with questions I wasn't ready to ask. We packed up at first light, the sky bruised but clear. Eli was quieter than usual, his usual bravado replaced by a nervous energy. I caught him glancing at me, like he was waiting for me to bolt or judge him. But I wasn't going anywhere. If anything, his words had tethered me to him in a way I hadn't expected. Still, I didn't know what to do with the ache in my chest, the realization that I'd been in love with him too, maybe for years, but had buried it under the label of best friend. The trail ahead was steep, winding through dense pines and jagged rocks. We hiked in silence, the crunch of our boots the only sound. I wanted to say something, to bridge the gap between us, but every time I opened my mouth, the words felt wrong. How do you tell someone you've loved them in secret, especially when they've just bared their soul? Halfway up, we stopped at a stream to refill our water bottles. Eli crouched by the water, his reflection rippling in the current. "You're quiet," he said, not looking at me. "You freaking out?" "A little," I admitted, sitting on a flat rock. "Not because of you. Just trying to wrap my head around it." I hesitated, then added, "I wish you'd told me sooner." He looked up, his eyes sharp. "Would it have changed anything? You know how Crestview is. You barely made it through coming out. I wasn't strong like you. Noah." His voice cracked, and he looked away, splashing water on his face like he could wash away the shame. "You're stronger than you think," I said, my voice firm. "You climbed a damn mountain to tell me the truth. That's not weak." He didn't respond, but the corner of his mouth twitched, a ghost of his old grin. We kept moving, the trail growing narrower, the air thinner. By late afternoon, we reached a small clearing with a view of the valley below, the peaks glowing gold in the setting sun. Eli dropped his pack and sat, his hands clasped tightly. "This is it," he said. "The spot I wanted to show you." I sat beside him, our shoulders brushing. The view was breathtaking, but it was Eli I couldn't stop looking at the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands fidgeted, the way he seemed to carry the weight of the world. "Why now?" I asked. "Why tell me here?" "Because up here, it's just us," he said, his voice low. "No Crestview, no expectations. Just you and me and the truth." He paused, then added, "I've been carrying this for so long, Noah. It's like I was drowning, and you were the only one who could pull me out." His words hit me like a punch. I'd spent years thinking I was the one who needed saving, the one who needed Eli's strength to survive Crestview's judgment. But now I saw it needed me just as much. "I'm here," I said, my voice thick. "I've always been here." He turned to me, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment, I thought he might lean in, might close the distance between us. But then he pulled back, his gaze dropping to the ground. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I don't know how to be me." "You don't have to have it all figured out," I said, reaching for his hand. His fingers were cold, but they curled around mine. tentative but real. We'll figure it out together. That night, we camped in the clearing, the stars brighter than I'd ever seen. We talked until our voices were hoarse about high school, about the times we'd almost said something but didn't, about the fear of what came next. I told him about the crush I'd had on him at 16, how I'd pushed it down because I thought he was straight, because I couldn't lose him. He laughed, a real laugh, and said, "God, we're idiots." But as we lay in our sleeping bags, the space between us felt smaller, warmer. I didn't know what we were yet, friends. Something more. Something undefined, but for the first time, I felt like we were on the same path. Not just climbing a mountain, but building something new. The next morning, we faced a choice: push to the summit or head back down. Eli wanted the summit, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of the last 2 days. "Let's take it slow," I suggested. "We've got time." He nodded, and we started the descent. The trail easier, but no less daunting. Every step felt like a step toward something bigger, toward Crestview, toward the truth, toward us. I didn't know what waited at the bottom, but with Eli beside me, I felt ready to face it. The descent was quieter than the climb, each step pulling us closer to Crestview and the reality we'd left behind. Eli's confession had changed everything, but it hadn't erased the world waiting for us below, the town that judged, the families that expected, the lives we'd built on half-truths. I kept stealing glances at him, his profile sharp against the morning light, wondering how we'd navigate this new terrain. We stopped at a rocky outcrop to eat, sharing a granola bar in silence. The wooden heart was in my pocket now, a constant reminder of what he'd given May as truth, his vulnerability, his love. I wanted to say something, to tell him I felt the same, but the words felt too big, too fragile for the open air. Instead, I nudged his shoulder. "You good?" He nodded, but his eyes were distant. "Just thinking about home," he said. "My dad, he's not going to understand this." His voice was low, heavy with the weight of years spent trying to please a man who saw weakness in anything less than perfection. "Then we'll deal with it together," I said, surprising myself with how sure I sounded. "You don't have to face him alone." Eli looked at me, his expression softening, and for a moment, I saw the kid he used to beta, one who'd sneak me into his garage to tinker with his dad's old Chevy, who'd laugh until we couldn't breathe. The trail wound through a dense forest, the pines casting long shadows. We talked about lighter things, our favorite hikes, the time we got lost in the woods at 14, the way Crestview's diner made the best milkshakes. But beneath it all was a current of something new, something unspoken. Every brush of our hands, every shared glance, felt like a step toward something more. By afternoon, we reached a small lake, its surface mirror smooth under the sun. Eli dropped his pack and waded in, not caring that his boots were still on. "Come on, Noah," he called, splashing water my way. I laughed, kicking off my shoes and joining him, the cold shocking my skin. For a moment, we were just us again, two idiots messing around. No confessions, no fears. But when he grabbed my wrist to pull me deeper, his touch lingered, and our eyes met, the air electric. "Eli," I started, my heart racing. But he shook his head, his grin faltering. "Don't," he said softly. "Not yet. Let's just be here." I nodded, understanding. We weren't ready to name this thing between us, not when the world below was waiting to tear it apart. That night, we camped by the lake, the fire crackling between us. Eli told me about the first time he realized he wasn't straight how he'd watched me during a high school football game. My laughter cutting through the noise. And felt something he couldn't explain. I thought I was broken. He admitted. Poking the fire with a stick. Took me years to realize I wasn't. You're not broken, I said fiercely. You're you. And that's enough. He looked at me, his eyes shining in the firelight. And I wanted to close the distance. To kiss him. To make this real. But I didn't. Not yet. The next morning, we were quieter. The weight of Crestview looming closer. Eli's dad was a mechanic. Like him. But harder. Colder. The kind of man who saw emotions as cracks in a machine. I'd seen the way he looked at Eli. Like he was waiting for him to fail. And me. He tolerated me. But only because I was Eli's friend. If he knew the truth, I wasn't sure what he'd do. As we neared the trailhead, Eli stopped, his hand on my arm. Noah. If we, he faltered, his voice thick. I don't want to lose you. You won't, I said, my voice steady. Whatever happens, we're in this together. He nodded, but his eyes were clouded, and I knew he was bracing for a fight not with me, but with the life he'd been running from. We reached the Jeep by dusk, the mountains fading into the horizon. As we drove back to Crestview, the silence between us was heavy but not empty. It was filled with possibility, with fear, with the promise of something we hadn't named yet. I didn't know what waited for us, but I knew one thing: Eli wasn't alone anymore. And neither was I. Crestview's lights flickered in the distance as Eli's Jeep rumbled down the highway. The hum of the engine filling the space where words should have been. The wooden heart in my pocket felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of everything we'd left unsaid. I glanced at Eli, his hands tight on the wheel, his jaw set like he was steeling himself for battle. We pulled into town just after midnight. The streets quiet except for the neon glow of the diner. Eli parked outside my apartment, a cramped one-bedroom above the hardware store. Neither of us moved. You want to come up? I asked, breaking the silence. He hesitated, then nodded. Inside, my place was a mess, book stacked on every surface. Coffee mugs in the sink, but it felt safe. Like a bubble where Crestview's rules didn't apply. Eli sank onto the couch, his hands clasped tightly. I don't know how to do this, Noah, he said, his voice raw. Back there, on the mountain, it was easy. But here, it's real now. I sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his arm. It's always been real, I said. You just weren't ready to see it. He looked at me, his eyes searching, and I took a chance, leaning in to kiss him. It was tentative, soft, but it felt like coming home. He froze for a second, then kissed me back, his hands finding mine, the wooden heart pressed between us. When we pulled apart, his face was flushed, his breath uneven. I've wanted to do that for years, he admitted, a shaky laugh escaping. But I'm terrified. Noah, my dad, the shop, the town, they'll eat us alive. Let them try, I said, my voice fiercer than I felt. We're not kids anymore. We don't have to play by their rules. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't that simple. Crestview wasn't just a place. It was a mindset, one that didn't take kindly to people like us. The next day, reality hit hard. I was at the coffee shop, pouring lattes for the morning crowd, when Eli's dad, Frank, walked in. He was a big man, all muscle and scowl, his presence sucking the air out of the room. Where's my son? He barked, ignoring the line of customers. Probably at the shop, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Frank's eyes narrowed, like he could smell the truth on me. He's been acting strange since that damn trip, he said, leaning over the counter. You know anything about that? My heart pounded, but I held his gaze. Just a camping trip, I said, forcing a shrug. You know, Eli. He needed a break. Frank grunted, unconvinced, and left without ordering. I exhaled, my hands shaking as I wiped the counter. Eli was right, this wasn't going to be easy. That evening, I met Eli at the garage, the smell of oil and metal sharp in the air. He was under a car, his hands moving with the ease of someone who'd been fixing things his whole life. Dad was here earlier, he said, not looking at me. Asked about the trip. I told him it was nothing, but he didn't buy it. We'll deal with it, I said, echoing my words from the mountain. But Eli's face was tight, his hands pausing on the wrench. He's not like your parents, Noah. He won't just get over it. He slid out from under the car, his shirt streaked with grease. I've been thinking about leaving, starting over somewhere else, somewhere I can be me. The idea hit me like a punch. Leave Crestview. It was all I'd ever wanted. But the thought of Eli leaving or us leaving together was both thrilling and terrifying. Would you really do it? I asked, my voice low. He looked at me, his eyes steady. If you came with me. My breath caught, and for a moment, the garage felt like the mountain again, just us. No one else. I nodded, unable to speak, and he smiled, a real smile that made my chest ache. But Crestview wasn't done with us yet. That night, someone spray-painted "fag" on the side of Eli's Jeep, the red letters stark against the faded green. We found it in the morning, parked outside the garage, and Eli's face went pale, his hands clenching into fists. They know, he whispered, his voice shaking. Someone saw us, or heard, or we don't know that, I said, grabbing his arm. It could be random, kids being assholes. But we both knew better. Crestview had eyes everywhere, and secrets didn't stay buried long. We can't stay here, Eli said, his voice breaking. Not like this. I nodded, my resolve hardening. Whatever came next, we'd face it together just like we'd promised on the mountain. The spray paint on Eli's Jeep was a warning, a crack in the fragile bubble we'd built. We scrubbed it off with gasoline and rags, the chemical stench burning our noses. But the word lingered in my mind. Sharp and ugly. Eli was quiet, his movements mechanical, like he was trying to erase more than just paint. This is my fault, he said finally, tossing the rag aside. I should have kept my mouth shut. No, I said, grabbing his shoulder. You don't get to take this on. Whoever did this, they're the problem, not you. But his eyes were haunted, and I knew he was thinking of his dad, of the town, of the life he'd tried so hard to fit into. We didn't talk about it again that day, but the air was thick with tension. I went back to the coffee shop, pouring drinks on autopilot, my mind on Eli. Customers whispered, their glances sharper than usual, and I caught fragments of gossip rumors about us, about the trip, about things no one should have known. Crestview was closing in, and I felt like we were running out of time. That night, Eli showed up at my apartment, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I can't stay at home, he said, his voice low. Dad's asking questions. He saw the Jeep before we cleaned it. My stomach dropped. Frank wasn't the type to let things slide. "Stay here," I said, stepping aside to let him in. He dropped his bag and sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. I sat beside him, close but not touching, giving him space to breathe. "What did he say?" "He didn't say much," Eli muttered. "Just looked at me like I was a stranger. Asked if I was one of those people now." He laughed, a bitter sound. I didn't answer. I just left. I reached for his hand, my fingers brushing his. "You're not alone in this," I said. "We'll figure it out." He looked at me, his eyes softening. And for a moment, the world felt small again, just us. Like on the mountain. I leaned in, kissing him gently. And this time, he didn't pull away. It was slow, tentative, but it felt like a promise. The next few days were a blur of whispers and stares. At the coffee shop, regulars stopped coming, and my boss gave me a talk about keeping my personal life quiet. Eli stayed at the garage, but his dad was there more often, watching him like a hawk. We met in secret, stealing moments in my apartment or the back of the diner. But it wasn't enough. The town was suffocating us, and the idea of leaving grew from a possibility to a necessity. One night, we sat on my couch, a map spread out on the coffee table. Where would we go? I asked, tracing highways with my finger. Seattle. Portland. Somewhere nobody knows us. Anywhere but here, Eli said, his voice firm. "I've got some savings. We could start over. You could write. I could find a shop. We could be us." His eyes met mine, and I saw something new: hope. Fragile but real. We spent hours planning, dreaming of a life where we didn't have to hide. But Crestview wasn't done with us. The next morning, Frank showed up at my apartment, his face like thunder. "You're the one messing with my boy," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I want you to stay away from him." "He's not a kid," I shot back, my heart pounding. "And neither am I. You don't get to tell us who we are." Frank's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue. He just turned and left, his silence more threatening than words. Eli was furious when I told him. "He doesn't get to control me anymore," he said, pacing my tiny living room. "We're leaving, Noah. Soon." I nodded, but fear gnawed at me. Leaving meant starting over, but it also meant facing the unknown: new jobs, new city, new risks. Still, with Eli beside me, it felt possible. We set a date, 1 week. We'd pack what we could fit in the Jeep and drive west, chasing a life where we could be free. But as the days passed, the town's pressure grew. More graffiti appeared not just on the Jeep, but on the garage, on my apartment building. Anonymous notes slipped under my door, calling us names I won't repeat. Eli's dad stopped speaking to him entirely, and the silence was worse than any fight. By the night before we planned to leave, we were both on edge, our bags packed, the Jeep ready. We sat on my couch, the wooden heart on the table between us. "Are we doing the right thing?" Eli asked, his voice small. I took his hand, my thumb brushing over his knuckles. "We're doing the only thing," I said. "We deserve to be happy, Eli. Together." He smiled, and for the first time in days, I felt like we might make it. The morning we planned to leave Crestview, the air was thick with the promise of rain. Eli and I loaded the Jeep in silence, our bags stuffed with clothes, books, and the few things that mattered. The wooden heart was in my pocket, a talisman against the uncertainty ahead. We didn't talk about what we were leaving behind. Eli's dad. My job. The town that had shaped us, but it hung between us. Heavy and unspoken. As we drove past the diner, I caught a glimpse of my boss watching from the window. Her expression unreadable. Eli's hands were tight on the wheel, his eyes fixed on the road. You ready for this? He asked, his voice low. Ready as I'll ever be, I said, forcing a smile. Truth was, I was terrified. We had enough money for a few months. A vague plan to head to Portland. And each other. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep going. The highway stretched out, endless and open, a stark contrast to Crestview's claustrophobic streets. We talked about small things: music, food, the kind of apartment we'd find but avoided the big ones. What if we couldn't make it? What if the world outside was just as cruel? I pushed the thoughts down, focusing on Eli's profile, the way his hair caught the morning light. We were an hour out when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face tightening. It's Dad, he said, tossing the phone into the back. He's been calling all morning. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. You don't have to answer, I said. Not now. He nodded, but I could see the guilt in his eyes, the weight of a father who'd never understand. By noon, we stopped at a gas station, the kind with flickering lights and stale coffee. While Eli filled the tank, I went inside for snacks, my mind buzzing with the reality of what we were doing. As I paid, the clerk, a grizzled man with a trucker hat, gave me a long look. You one of those boys from Crestview? He asked, his tone sharp. I froze, my hand on the counter. Just passing through, I said, keeping my voice steady. He grunted, but his eyes followed me out the door. When I told Eli, he cursed under his breath. Word travels fast, he said, climbing into the Jeep. We need to keep moving. The rest of the drive was tense, the open road feeling less like freedom and more like exposure. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting Frank's truck to appear behind us. That night, we camped in a state park, too tired to keep driving. The stars were bright, but the air was cold, and we huddled close in the tent, our sleeping bags zipped together for warmth. I'm sorry, Eli whispered, his voice barely audible, for dragging you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere, I said, turning to face him. I chose this. I chose you. His eyes met mine, and for the first time since we'd left, he smiled a real smile, the kind that made my heart ache. We kissed, slow and deep, the world outside fading away. In that moment, it was just us, and it felt like enough. But the world wasn't done with us. The next morning, Eli's phone was flooded with messages: Frank, friends from the garage, even my boss, all demanding answers. They think we're running away, Eli said, his voice bitter. Like we're criminals. Let them think what they want, I said, but my stomach twisted. We were running, in a way, but not from guilt, from a town that wouldn't let us be. We kept driving, crossing state lines, the landscape shifting from mountains to plains to forests. With every mile, Crestview felt farther away, but so did the safety of the known. In a diner in Idaho, we overheard a news report about troubled youth leaving small towns. And though they didn't name us, it felt personal. Eli's hand found mine under the table, his grip tight. By the time we reached Oregon, we were exhausted, our money dwindling faster than we'd planned. We found a cheap motel, the kind with thin walls and flickering lights. and collapsed onto the bed, too tired to talk. But as I lay there, Eli's arm around me, I felt a flicker of hope. We were free, or at least freer than we'd ever been. "We're gonna make it," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He didn't answer, but his hand tightened around mine, and that was enough. Portland's skyline loomed ahead, a jagged promise of something new. We'd been on the road for days, living on gas station snacks and stolen moments. But as we crossed the city limits, I felt a weight lift. Eli's hand rested on my knee, his thumb tracing slow circles. And for the first time since Crestview, I believed we could do this, build a life, not just survive one. We found a cheap apartment in a gritty part of town, all we could afford with our savings. It was small, with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, but it was ours. Eli got a job at a garage, his hands quickly finding their rhythm among the tools. I took shifts at a bookstore, surrounded by novels that fueled my own writing dreams. At night, we'd collapse together, our bodies tangled in the narrow bed, the wooden heart on the nightstand watching over us. But freedom came with a cost. Crestview's shadow followed us, phone calls from Eli's dad, angry voicemails demanding he come home, letters from my parents pleading for me to think this through. We ignored them, but each one chipped away at us, reminding us of the world we'd left behind. One night, Eli broke down, his face buried in his hands. "What if we made a mistake?" he whispered. "What if I'm not worth this?" I pulled him close, my heart aching. "You're worth everything," I said. "We're worth everything." I kissed him, fierce and desperate, pouring every ounce of my belief into it. He kissed me back, and for a moment, the doubts faded. Portland wasn't perfect. The city was kinder than Crestview, but not blind stares followed us when we held hands, and job applications sometimes vanished when employers saw us together. But there were bright spots, a queer bookstore where I found my voice, a mechanic who didn't care who Eli loved as long as he could fix a carburetor. We made friends, tentative at first, then real people who saw us, not just our story. One evening, months after we'd settled, we hiked to a hill overlooking the city, the lights twinkling below like stars. Eli carried the wooden heart, his fingers tracing its edges. "I made this for you because I didn't know how to say it," he said, his voice soft. "I still don't. Not really. But I love you, Noah. I always have." My throat tightened, and I took his hand, the heart pressed between us. "I love you too," I said, the words finally free. We stood there, the city sprawling beneath us, and I realized this was what the mountain had been leading us to, not just a confession, but a life. Messy, hard, but ours. Years later, we'd look back on Crestview as a distant memory, a place that shaped us but didn't define us. Eli's dad never came around, but my parents did. Slowly, their visits filled with awkward hugs and halting questions. We built a home, not just in Portland, but in each other, a foundation stronger than any mountain. The wooden heart sits on our shelf now, a reminder of the climb we took, the truths we found, the love we fought for. It's not a perfect story. There are scars, regrets, days when the world feels too heavy. But it's ours, carved from courage and honesty. And that's enough.